Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewilded Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Joy. And if you noticed, I went quiet for a couple of weeks. Yes, I did, and that was intentional. I took a little hiatus. I was house sitting, dog sitting, wrapping up some gardening projects, and I just made the call to step away from recording while I was doing all of that. Sometimes you just need to prioritize and let some things go for a little bit. I did keep the blog going though. So if you weren't aware, I have a blog on my website, and not every podcast episode is also a blog. I'll always let you know which ones are and which ones aren't. Typically, I'm trying to do one blog per week and one podcast per week. And when I have time to record the blog content as an episode, I do that too. So definitely check the show notes. In the episodes, there's been some good stuff going up over on the website, on the blog, even if the podcast is quiet. Plus, there's always the archives to dig back through. So if you're new here, welcome. I've genuinely loved hearing from people who have found the podcast and found it helpful. And speaking of that, there's now a link in the show notes where you can text me directly. It's the first link at the very top of the show notes. You can just hit reply, tell me what you thought about the episode, tell me what you loved, what you learned, your takeaway, what you want to hear more of. I love that kind of connection. And I really do love hearing from you guys. Couple of things before I dive in. First, there are some exciting updates happening with the BiomeFX test that I work with in my practice. The test itself has been upgraded, and it's now testing for 64 pathogens. I think it was 28 before. I'm not sure if I have the numbers correct. And 16 parasites, which is a significant expansion. And we're also getting much more research support on the back end, which is going to deepen how I'm able to interpret and work with results for clients. So as I learn more, I'll absolutely be sharing it here. It's a really exciting time in microbiome research. And what I love most is that the conversation is shifting away from just identifying and killing pathogens and moving toward the terrain approach, which, if you've been around here for a while, you know is exactly how I think about this work. And that actually brings me to something that happened in my yard recently. First, I want to go back about a year ago. If you've been around listening to the podcast, I talked about poison ivy. It's actually in the title of the episode if you want to go back and listen. But I talked about this poison ivy situation here on the property, how this property had been left unattended. The soil had gone to its own, right? It became very acidic, very compacted, and invasive things had basically taken over because nothing healthy could compete. So I had my lawn guy here the other day, and the poison ivy, it's not gone. It takes time, right? It is creeping back in certain spots, parts of the yard that have not yet been cleaned up and attended to. And of course, I don't want to use any harsh chemicals to eradicate the poison ivy. That's just not how I operate. So anyways, without me even having to explain myself to him, he said, well, the real solution would be, honestly, for you to improve the soil quality to allow the land to recover so the poison ivy doesn't have conditions to thrive in anymore. And that was like, ding, 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 ding. You said the right thing. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. That is the whole philosophy. You don't win by declaring war on the invader. You win by making the terrain inhospitable to it and hospitable to what you want there, what belongs there. And that is as true in a body as it is in a yard, which leads perfectly into today's episode. I want to talk about bloating because this comes up constantly with clients coming into my practice, where eating food starts to feel like this unpredictable gamble. The same meal lands completely differently from maybe one day to the next. People are maybe tracking, or maybe they're eliminating or trying to reintroduce things. And nothing quite adds up. And the reason it doesn't add up is, again, their inner terrain. The body's internal environment, it has been compromised in ways that have made the entire digestive tract inherently inconsistent. And chasing the food, finding a bad food, is rarely where the answer lives. So I wrote a blog on April 20th. It's called When Eating Feels Like a Gamble, the bloating pattern that doesn't add up. The link will be in the show notes if you want to read the full blog. Today, I'm going to talk you through it. It's relatively short, very focused, and I think a lot of you are going to recognize yourself in it. All right, let's get into it. So let's talk about bloating and specifically about why it stops making sense. Because at some point, eating just stops feeling predictable for many people. Like pretty much every client that comes to me is saying that to me. They're like, I don't know what to eat anymore, right? The same food might not land twice, or, you've eaten something that you've eaten 100 times, and then like out of nowhere, it's changed, right? Like one day it's fine, years it's fine, and then suddenly it's not, right? And you're feeling this discomfort and distension and like literally racking your brain trying to figure out what the heck changed. Okay, so a lot of times people do things. Maybe they eliminate foods or they start tracking foods. Sometimes things maybe settle out, life feels smooth. Especially if you like took something out, maybe you reintroduce it, or maybe you go through a pocket of stress and it all comes back, right? Like you suddenly feel discomfort and bloating and pressure and all these things. And you're like, man, is it the food or not? Is it the quantity of the food? Is it something else? I don't know, right? And so what happens is people stop trusting the food. They stop trusting the same meal that they were eating. They start second guessing the things that they used to eat without thinking. And then their digestion starts to feel like something they have to actively manage rather than something that just naturally happens in the background without thinking about it. And after a while, the pattern doesn't make sense to them anymore. And the confusion around what's going on is its own kind of exhausting. So here's what's actually going on. Food is involved. I want to be clear about that. Certain foods can trigger bloating, and that's real and it's worth taking seriously. For example, a heavy, high-fat meal can overwhelm bile flow and slow digestion significantly, especially if it's already impaired, and that can produce the kind of fullness, maybe reflux, bloating, that has nothing to do with sensitivity to the food and everything to do with load. Okay, so certain foods or quantities can simply exceed what your digestive system can process cleanly in the current moment based on your current overall health terrain, right? But here's the more complicated picture. The same food can produce a completely different response depending on the internal state of your body when you eat it. That's not a theory, that's physiology. You're not just reacting to the food, you're reacting to the state your body is in when you eat the food. So, what's actually running in the background? Well, digestion requires a coordinated cascade of signals, secretions, muscular activity, and all of it is influenced by things that have nothing to do with what's on your plate. I'm going to assume that you are eating real food as best sourced as you can, okay? I'm not assuming you're eating fast food, fried food, stuff like that, okay? If you're doing that, then yes, that's going to be hurting you. But if you're eating, what people say is clean or real food, right? It's definitely, we're going into the biology of the body, right? So let's start with hydrochloric acid. I have probably a couple episodes on this in the past. Big deal, right? This is often missed when we talk about bloating, okay? Because your stomach needs adequate hydrochloric acid production to activate pepsin, which is the enzyme that initiates protein digestion. So when your production of hydrochloric acid is low or slow or inadequate, proteins that you eat do not break down properly in your stomach, okay? And then they move into your small intestine, partially digested, where they become fuel, like the wrong pH, right? Where they become fuel for fermentation and then can trigger immune responses that look a lot like food sensitivities or allergies. So here's the part that most people don't really understand or hear about. Fats are digested through a completely different pathway, primarily bile, excuse me, and pancreatic lipase. So they don't depend on hydrochloric acid the way proteins and carbohydrates do. This is why someone with chronically low stomach acid can end up feeling like they're reacting to almost everything except for fats, right? Eggs, meat, grains, legumes all feel like problems, but butter, avocado, oil, they feel completely fine. And the pattern looks like extreme sensitivity when the actual issue is inadequate acid production. And hydrochloric acid production can drop for a lot of reasons, a lot. The state of your nervous system, for one, chronic stress, H. pylori infection, even long-term use of acid-suppressing medications, which I hope you guys aren't doing because we talked about this for years, mineral depletion, and more, okay? Again, there's a whole episode worth of content just on that. Go dig through the archives. I think there's 2. They're really good. And, the reflux and heartburn that people typically blame on too much acids, frequently the opposite. It's poorly digested, food fermenting, and creating upward pressure. Okay, so bear with me. I know this is slightly nerdy, but I feel when you hear how your body's supposed to work, things click for you, okay? Hydrochloric acid also signals downstream, right? And this part matters. So basically, when you have the right amount, your body's able to produce adequate stomach acid each meal. It's going to also tell the pancreas to release digestive enzymes. All right, so when that signal is weak, the enzyme output drops, and food that wasn't fully broken down in the stomach doesn't get finished breaking down in the small intestine either. So then, undigested food reaching the large intestine feeds microbial fermentation, and that fermentation produces pressure, bloating, gas. Then there is motility. I did a whole episode about that recently. Check it out. It's really important. This is how quickly or slowly your entire transit is, like how slowly or fast food moves through your entire GI. All right. Barrier integrity matters too. Again, I did a whole series on all this stuff. You guys go back, listen to it. It's really good. When your gut lining is more permeable than it should be, immune activation follows, which quietly alters the motility, the sensitivity, the secretion. And reminder, digestion is a parasympathetic function, meaning it requires your nervous system to not be on high alert, to be in a state of relative ease, to work properly. When it's not, enzyme output drops, motility shifts, blood flow to the gut even changes. And this is why the same meal or food lands completely differently depending on what kind of day you had before you sat down to eat it. So why does it feel so random? The inconsistency isn't random. It just is reflecting how many variables are actually involved. So some days your digestive output could feel adequate, your motility could be working fine, and the meal moves through cleanly, no problem. Other days, you're running on poor sleep, your body is under higher load, stress, something happened, your nervous system hasn't had a chance to settle. The same meal meets a completely different internal environment and things don't break down as well. Food can sit longer, fermentation can increase, you bloat. And food gets the blame because it's the only variable you feel like you can connect to or control, right? But it's rarely what actually changed. What shifts day to day is your sleep, your stress load, how much minerals you burn through or don't take, how much hydrochloric acid output you have, your nervous system state, right? Like that's what's actually driving the difference. Now, there's another piece I want to name that doesn't get talked about enough, and I call it the low reserve problem. Okay. Digestion is metabolically expensive, meaning it requires energy, it requires minerals, it requires a nervous system that can actually shift into a state and stay there where digestion is prioritized. And so when someone has been under prolonged stress for whatever variety of myriad of reasons, or maybe they're managing a chronic health pattern for years or decades, their overall physiological reserve tends to be quietly depleted, and their body starts allocating resources differently. Protective functions get prioritized and digestive efficiency drops. And then the person's tolerance really narrows. And things that were manageable before are now starting to produce more and more symptoms. They didn't change, the system just has less capacity to handle them. And this is when people find themselves, planning their meals really carefully, like overthinking the shit out of what they're going to try to eat. I've been there, right? Or avoiding situations where they can't control what they eat, or building days around what their gut might do. Managing becomes like the whole strategy, and actually moving forward stops feeling like a real option. Or there's the people who are like, I give up. I don't know. I don't know what to eat. And, they say extreme things like, maybe I should just become a breatharian. I'm like, no, please don't do that. So what does this mean for how you approach it? Okay. So most people who have been dealing with this have been dealing with it for years. A lot of times what people are telling me is they had a significant life stressor, a breakup, a family crisis, a death in the family, a concussion, a child having a major health crisis. You get the point. They usually say something like that happened, right? And after that shit just went sideways, right? Like, they started having funky symptoms, digestion, stuff just got worse. Whereas like before they noticed it here and there, didn't feel so bad, right? Right. So people have been dealing with this for years, okay? And the energy that goes into like overthinking and tracking or avoiding or adjusting or second guessing, right? Like that too is real and it compounds over time. And that's not a small cost, right? Like chasing specific foods and avoiding them rarely resolves things, right? Yes, we know food is involved. Yes. And it's downstream of the actual problem, right? I told you, the hydrochloric acid piece for one thing, right? Like if you remove the triggering food, it still leaves the underlying production issue completely untouched. You see what I'm saying? If your nervous system cannot stand down and you are in cell danger response, or you are in freeze, or you're in a protective state, what you think is like a clean diet or a diet where you're avoiding your triggers, it's not going to restore your digestive function. Sure, maybe it'll help reduce some of the reactivity. Maybe. Not always. Most people who are avoiding things are still having problems, like pretty significant problems. They're just not having as extreme by taking certain things out, right? But they're still not fixing anything. and they're forced into narrower and narrower windows of what they can eat safely and comfortably, right? We also know when the gut barrier is compromised, and I will tell you, I haven't met a single person who doesn't have a compromised gut barrier, where the immune activation can be much more, ongoing, ready to mount a response, like always like looking out for danger, right? What happens is the triggers kind of like shift, right? And you almost don't ever really know what your body's going to react to. And so the question worth asking isn't just, what am I reacting to? It's, why is my system reacting this way? And what does it actually need to function differently? And that's a different kind of work than elimination, reintroduction, right? It's slower, it's more precise, but it does address what's actually driving the pattern instead of just like managing around it. All right. So I hope that you're picking up what I'm putting down and it's starting to help you make sense of what's might be happening in your body, because that's really the whole point. I don't want to give you more tons of information to track and manage, but more of like a big picture framework that explains some of why, taking out foods, tracking your foods, over managing your foods hasn't been working. All right. The through line in everything I am here to share and do is terrain. Whether we're talking about bloating or, the nervous system or gut health, right? The question I'm always asking is, what are the conditions this person's body is operating under? And what does it need to actually function differently? Because when the conditions shift, the symptoms shift with them. That's just how biology works. So if you've recognized yourself in what I shared today, right, like the inconsistency, the second guessing, the feeling that you've tried things and nothing fully holds, that's worth paying attention to. It's not random. It's also not permanent, right? Even if you've been dealing it for a really long time and think like, oh my gosh, is this just how my body is, right? It just requires looking at it from the right lens, okay? And if you're curious about working together, all this happens inside Minerals and Microbes, where we look at your minerals, your gut, your nervous system together, your whole health history, and build from where your body actually is right now. Okay, so you can find the link for Minerals and Microbes. You can read more about it. It's very thorough. I wanted it to be as thorough as possible, so please take your time, read through it. Make sure you find yourself in this work, and it's all there for you. Now, a couple of things before I let you go. If this episode was helpful, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who needs to hear it. Word of mouth is everything for an independent podcast, and I genuinely appreciate every person who passes it along. And if you want to reach out directly, use that little text me link below. It's right there in the show notes. First one. I read everything, and I love hearing from you. And until next time, take really good care of yourself. Slow down, let things be boring, consistent in a way that your body's asking for, and stay wild and stay well. And I'll talk to you real soon.